Good evening, investors. Thank you for tuning into Quantum Mutual Fund's E-Path to Profit. I am Ghazal Jain, Associate Fund Manager, Alternative Investments, and I will be taking you through today's session. The last couple of months have been about prioritizing safety and liquidity over returns. We saw financial markets go through extremely volatile and turbulent times. But investors are now finding themselves at a very crucial point. On the one hand, there are lingering macroeconomic uncertainties which are warranting defensive portfolio positions. And on the other hand, a post-pandemic recovery is opening up opportunities to make good returns. So essentially, the question facing investors today is, how do I plan my investments in a way that I do not end up sitting on too much cash and missing out on returns, but also at the same time protect my portfolio from another market crash or a second wave of COVID-19? Our speakers today, Mr. Pankaj Pathak, Fund Manager Fixed Income, and Mr. Nilesh Shetty, Associate Fund Manager Quantum Long-Term Equity Value Fund, will be answering just that question. Now, without further ado, I'd like to request Pankaj and Nilesh to take us through their presentation. Over to you, Pankaj.
Thank you, Gajal, and thank you all the participants for joining in. Now, as we all know that we are living in an unprecedented time, right? So we are just adjusting our lifestyle to the new social distancing norms and work from home and various other stuff. At the same time, there is a need to relook at the overall portfolio as well, our investment portfolios. Can we move to next slide, please? Yeah. So this chart shows the asset allocation of an average Indian. As I mentioned, that we have to look at the overall portfolio and what kind of exposure we are having to various asset classes. Now, as you can see, the blue bar, which reflects holding of cash and bank deposit, it's close to half of the entire portfolio. In 2017-18, the last data which is available, it was 49% of the entire portfolio for an average Indian household. So with that kind of exposure in fixed deposit, and again, there is 17% exposure in life insurance. Again, that's kind of fixed endowment funds, which is kind of fixed income in nature. And even in the others category, the 22%, most of it is in fixed income kind of category, like investment in PF or government securities and other stuff. And we have too little exposure to equities per se, which has a big track record of generating wealth over long term. Next slide, please. Now, just to show how that asset allocation of average Indian household has performed over the long period of time. So the best indicator or the proxy to compare that performance would be your living expenses or the consumption basket. So in this table, you can see in 1990, an average Indian has to spend close to 23,700 rupees on its consumption basket on a per annum basis. This is what was required for your living expenses. And the same thing is now close to 4,27,000 rupees per annum. So that's kind of increase in your cost of living, and maybe some bit of standard of living what has changed. But how other asset classes, if suppose you have not consumed and invested that same amount into gold, which was at 3,400 at that time for 10 gram, you could have easily bought 70 units of gold. But now that seems for maintaining that level of consumption or that consuming that again that 4,27,000 what is required, you actually need 91 units of gold. So that time you were able to buy only 70, but now you need 91. So probably you need some more money to maintain a same kind of standard of living or maintaining a similar consumption basket if you have invested entire money into gold. If you would have invested in, say, BSE Sensex, which can be treated as a proxy for equities, uh, that time BSE Sensex in 1990 was 730, and with 23,700, you could have bought almost 33 units of BSE Sensex. And now that you know that BSE Sensex is above 32,000, you only need 13 units for maintaining your consumption or living standard. And so you are still left with 20 units of BSE Sensex or the equity exposure. That suggests that with equities, you can easily maintain your living standard and even actually upgrade to a large extent. Uh, Now, as I mentioned that we have very high exposure to fixed income instruments, and so how fixed income has performed. Let's take proxy for fixed income as SBI 1 year deposit. So if you just take a base of 1,000 rupees invested in 1990, we could have bought 22 units of fixed deposit in 1990. But now in 2020, we actually require 73 units for maintaining our consumption basket or standard of living. So there is a huge shortfall if you have invested entire money into fixed deposits, and similarly many other asset classes. Uh, Actually, the return on fixed deposit is computed after adjusting for taxation. Uh, so there is a question now, how investors should look at all these asset classes, whether they should allocate entire money into equities or ignore fixed deposit or fixed income instruments completely, whether they should look at gold or not. Now, uh, ideally, there should be a mix of all the asset classes, because all these asset classes are fulfilling some or other objective. Now, as you know that with equities, uh, you have very long history of wealth creation, right? So from 1990 to 2020, that is 30 years. And if you look at the CAGR at the right-hand side, far right-hand side, the CAGR is at 13.4%. That's a big amount, right? Now, uh, that's one angle to generate wealth. But as we all know, equities are highly volatile. It can move up and down very sharply. And maybe when you need that money, maybe equities are down. Maybe you need money when equities were down in 2008 or maybe in March 2020. So you don't know when you need that money. So you need a bit of stability in your portfolio. Uh, that's where the fixed income allocation comes. So maybe after taxation, you are not getting rewarded in fixed deposit in the last 30 years. You have other instruments as well, which has their pros and cons. You can evaluate based on that. Uh, but definitely these instruments provide some bit of stability in your portfolio. When equities move up and down very sharply, the fixed income instruments can provide some stability. And maybe when you need money, this is where from you can withdraw. And similarly for gold, there is a strong case, because in the last 30 years, if you see a number of crises or big shocks the economy has witnessed, like what we have seen now, this is not one-off event, right? We have seen a lot of these kind of shocks happening in the last 20, 30 years, in 2008 or 2013 or 2003, 1997. There's a lot of events happened and big shocks happened. Uh, when we see those shocks, gold actually tend to perform better or kind of give a hedge against fall in equities or other stuff. So all the three asset classes fulfill some role, but definitely we need to have a optimal asset allocation or mix of all the three to get a better return out of your entire portfolio. So when you look at asset allocation, look at the whole portfolio and then derive how we can go about it. Now, as I mentioned, in the fixed income space, the objective is to provide stability. Now, if you look at the performance of fixed income funds or other instruments in the last 2 years, there's been a lot of negative news around that, uh, especially the debt mutual fund space, which had witnessed a lot of defaults, credit rating downgrades, and investors actually lost money in many of the funds. Next slide, please. So before going into that part, how to go about fixed income investing, because that's a big chunk of our portfolio, and what to do with the excess money lying in form of cash in either in saving bank account or in a liquid fund or in purely in cash. Uh, we just let's have a broader overview of what kind of economic scenario or market scenario we are in, how things can pan out going forward. So just give a little brief. This all started with this health crisis. Even before the health crisis, our economy was kind of trending down. But this health crisis and with the social distancing norms and the lockdown, we have actually seen a collapse in economic activity. If you see the broader estimates, most of the economists are forecasting now 5 to 7% kind of contraction in our GDP. Many of the businesses were shut. They lost their income, their cash flows. Workers lost their job, their income. You have seen news that the migrant laborers walking back their home villages. And at the same time, government also lost their tax revenue. So if businesses are not earning, they'll pay lower taxes. So that sustain even government from spending to revive economy. Now, all the three major segments of the economy has lost their income or the revenue. Now, look about the stress, about the impact on the debt market. Now, these businesses which have issued bond or borrowed from bank or mutual fund or other financial institutions, they may not be able to repay their borrowed money, right? So there will be stress in the financial system. There could be increase in defaults and downgrades. We have already seen a lot of defaults and downgrades happening in the last 2 years, and the situation can actually get worse before we see any kind of revival. Uh, so all in all, there will be increase in risk, especially the liquidity risk and the credit risk in case of fixed income investing. Either you're going directly into bonds or through mutual fund space, investing into debt or liquid fund. Now, again, even in liquid fund, you can face credit defaults. That has happened in the past. So just have this idea that for the next 2 years, you need to be very cautious while investing into debt fund space. Now, next slide. So why we should be worried about credit risk in first place? Now, as we have seen in the last 2 years, many of the funds recently have posted a big drop in their NAVs, and most of the times these are non-recoverable. So when a company default and you have lended to that, that's a permanent loss of capital. Similarly, it's a contingent risk that after ILNFS, when in September 2018 ILNFS defaulted, we have seen series of defaults happening. So it very quickly become contagious, and it's just the entire system. So there's no diversification benefit if you are exposed to a portfolio which invests entirely into a high risk debt instruments. Illiquidity, recently we have realized the illiquidity risk in case of debt mutual funds, where one of the big fund house has to wind down their debt schemes. So it's very difficult to sell all these lower rated corporate debt when you want to churn the portfolio or you face heavy redemption. There is no active secondary market in India. And risk rewards are clearly unfavorable for investors. So you can just look at the return of some of the funds which have faced credit defaults recently. Means the negative return to the extent of 20, 30, even 70% in most of the cases. So in best case scenario, maybe you can get 1 or 2% extra compared to a good quality portfolio. But in bad times, maybe you can lose your entire capital. That's a big trade-off, right? And again, that the idea behind investing in fixed income was to get stability in bad times. But what we have seen in case of debt fund investing into lower rated debt, that in the bad time, they are hurt more than equities. So it is actually not fulfilling the objective which we have invested for. So there's no diversification against equities. Next slide, please. So how to avoid this kind of scenario in debt fund? No, first thing is to look at the objective. As I mentioned that if objective is to get a stability, and you know that lower rated companies or weaker companies, they can actually struggle in bad times. So maybe that's not suited in your portfolio. So look at your objective. Uh, See what are the risks that you can actually tolerate, and what are the risks that you cannot afford to take. Now, as I mentioned, in case of credit, that risk reward is totally unfavorable. If you know you are exposed to a risk of losing half or full of your capital, whether you can take that risk. So that's the call investor has to take. Uh, and then you have to look at the underlying portfolio. Do not just depend on the rating of the fund or credit rating of the various debt instrument. Look at the underlying portfolio, what kind of investment they have, how much into government securities, how much into PSUs, and all. May need some help in that, but that's the uh, uh, tricky part in terms of investing into debt funds. Uh, and just see whether that portfolio is in sync with your objective. The best thing is to look at that portfolio and see how that portfolio is going to perform in bad times. And maybe you don't want to lose this money when things get worse. Next slide, please. So in case of quantum, that has been our thesis, that we always prioritize safety and liquidity, and we always been very vocal about it. We always mention that we will put safety and liquidity first, and just try to earn some sensible return after fulfilling these two criteria. And with that in mind, Quantum Liquid Fund invests only into government securities and public sector companies. We do not take any private credit exposure. Nothing in AAA private or not of any sort. So it's only government and quasi government PSU companies which are supported by government. The idea is even in AAAs, we have seen defaults happening, right? Big companies, big brand names, they defaulted on their debt obligation, and many got trapped. So we cannot actually rely on the rating scales. In my opinion, these are lagged indicators. We should not give too much importance on that. We should be looking at exposure into government securities and PSUs. Maybe that's a safer bet. Similarly, in our dynamic bond fund, again, we do not take any kind of credit exposure. That also invests only into government securities and PSUs. But that fund does take a lot of interest rate risk. So investing into very long maturity bonds, which are more volatile when interest rates move up and down. So that's the reason we advise investors to have longer time frame when they invest into dynamic bond fund. Next slide, please. So now with all this, and as I mentioned that in fixed income space, we have a huge variety of instrument to invest into, and debt mutual fund is one of the instruments. And there are some benefits attached to debt mutual funds when it comes to fixed income investing. The first and foremost is the diversification. So you're not getting exposed to any one company or one issuer. Debt mutual funds offer a diversified portfolio. It is highly liquid. So depending on the portfolio quality, obviously. So you need to be very cautious on the portfolio quality. But again, that you can redeem your investment anytime. There is a daily NAV on this. One of the biggest benefit in debt mutual funds is tax efficiency. So there is a indexation benefit if you remain invested for more than 3 years, and it applies capital gain tax of 20% after 3 years. But that indexation benefit is you staying, and there is a possibility of getting like a better return compared to many other fixed income instruments. But now, just in the current scenario where we have seen interest rates actually coming down across the maturity curve and across the instruments. So we have seen G-Sec yield coming down, money market yield or treasury bill yield coming down. And similarly, banks are also reducing their deposit rates, including saving bank deposit rate. We have seen cut in saving bank rate as well. And many of us actually keep a lot more money in saving banks than what is actually required. So at this time, maybe it's a time to have a relook at that allocation, because there is a compromise on return when you keep or get overexposed to asset class which is yielding much lower. For that part, we have Nilesh Sethi who will brief you about what you can do with this excess amount, which is lying in maybe saving bank account or excess amount in liquid fund or any other debt instrument. But again, we need some amount into these categories for stability or just as a buffer against any kind of emergency. But we should not get overexposed to any of these categories. Now, with that, I'll request Nilesh to come in and brief you about that. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Pankaj. Thank you so much. I mean, Pankaj explained, I mean, if you want to park your surplus liquidity, then quantum liquid fund is a fairly low risk product, perhaps unique in the industry, given that it takes zero credit risk. So it is a great product for you to earn relatively higher yields than your savings bank account, but it's not a well generating asset class. For well generation, like Pankaj showed in one of his earlier slides, you need to move to equities. So today what I'll do is I'll give you an overview of where we think equity markets are positioned, and then perhaps what is the best way or what we think allocation should be right now for people who want to allocate to equities. So please move to the next slide, please. So, I mean, the COVID crisis hit us at a very bad time. The Indian economy has been on a sliding scale, especially after demonetization. So demonetization happened somewhere in the last quarter of calendar year 2016. After that, whatever the numbers the government has been showing, that itself is suspect, because it's the new series and nobody knows, or there is no back series to that. Most economists sort of deduct 1 to 1.5% from that number to come to the old series of calculation. But even if you take the new series, there has been a sharp deceleration in the economy, and this is just before COVID crisis hit. So COVID crisis or the lockdown was announced in the last week of March for India. So the economy was in a bad shape, and at that point in time, the COVID crisis hit us. Next slide, please. So given the state of the economy, there was serious expectations from the government in terms of what they could do. One was, of course, given that, especially at the bottom of the pyramid, they essentially live on day-to-day earnings. And essentially you announce a lockdown because of which you could not allow them to earn. So there was expectation that they would transfer money at the bottom of the pyramid level for them to survive. A lot of support was expected to be extended to industry to ensure minimal job losses, which is what other countries have opted for. A lot of the countries have said 80% of their salaries will be paid by the government to ensure there is minimum job losses at this point in time. The other sort of expectation was that the government will substantially expand fiscal spending to counter the contraction that is going to happen by individuals like you and me who will not spend in an uncertain environment, or people who are facing job losses and salary decrease at this point in time, and to use both monetary and fiscal measures to stimulate demand, given that there will be contraction of spending in the economy. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. In that environment, what did the government do? The government essentially decided we are not going to spend too much fiscally, given that they think credit ratings are important. And they announced a slew of liquidity measures. Now, liquidity is okay; it lowers the cost of capital and essentially allows people to borrow more. But it doesn't solve the problem right now that people had, where they did not have money in hand to be able to do their basic chores, or it doesn't give people money in the hand of people to spend right now. So there is, out of that 21 trillion budget, a small amount was a fiscal measure, and everything else was liquidity boosting measure, which essentially lower the cost of capital but doesn't force people to spend right now. So it was a very clueless, frozen, and misdirected spend in the way they liquidity was something which was expected, but stimulus was perhaps a bigger portion of what was required in terms of fiscal stimulus, but they did not choose to do that. So the reason I'm showing this slide is what the government was essentially the big driver who could have driven revival, but given that the government action was fairly misdirected and very limited, a recovery which could have come after 12 months will now get postponed to perhaps 24 months. So it's something that we have to ponder, and I don't know, the government is indicating, or at least the last statement by the finance minister was there would be no more stimulus, but we'll be surprised. I think a lot more stimulus would be required to get India out of a rut that it was in even before COVID crisis hit. Next slide, please. And so where are the company earnings headed in this environment? So like I said, even before COVID, earnings estimates were sliding lower. Uh, Given that, so that blue shaded line in the background is a market, and the market kept on rallying and rallying in this environment. So most of the analysts, of course, to justify that rally, kept fairly high earnings estimates. And given that ground level situation was fairly weak, they kept on lowering the estimate. So you had essentially 5 years of very, very low earnings growth. So if you take 2014 to 2020, cumulative earnings growth has been around 10%. This is over a 5-year period, while the markets in that period essentially doubled. So you had this rally devoid of earnings. So it was, the correction itself was not a surprise because there has been a massive PE expansion in the market. And at some point there was rationality which was going to come in. The trigger came as a complete surprise. Nobody thought a small or a virus from China was going to decelerate everything around the world. So our sense is, even now, you see this sharp cut in FY21 earnings. We won't be surprised if it heads lower and lower because what we're hearing from companies is Q1, especially the first quarter, has been a wipeout. Q2, there'll be some gradual recovery. Q3 and Q4, based on government fiscal policy response, perhaps you might have a accelerating economy. Accelerating compared to Q2, but compared to last year, it will still be very, very muted economy in that sense. So that FY21 earnings could essentially get us back to FY18 levels in terms of earnings for this year. Hence, the massive correction that you saw is not a surprise. Next slide, please. And what was causing this massive rally? So retail flows over the last 4-5 years have actually picked up essentially after Mr. Modi got elected. And there are multiple reasons for that. One is, of course, interest rates in the economy came down after crude price corrected. Inflation has been fairly muted in India over the last 4-5 years. So interest rates, which were 9-10%, came down, or at least bank FD rates, which were in the region of 8-9%, came down to 6 and 7%. The real estate is going through its own problems. There is a lot of excess supply. A lot of developers are leveraged, and a lot of projects are pending. And that market essentially is going through some sort of restructuring right now, or churn right now. So real estate prices have been either flat or declining. So if you were a saver, and the big two pockets of savings, which are banks, fixed deposits, and real estate, were no longer that attractive, and you saw this equity market rallying on the back of hope that Mr. Modi was going to transform the economy, suddenly you decided to put a lot of money in equity markets. And that essentially became a virtuous cycle. Because more money came in, markets kept on going there. Seeing that again, more money came in. But all this was devoid of what was happening on the ground. Like I said, earnings just did not move in this entire 4-5 years. So essentially, it was a price earning multiple expansion, not necessarily an earnings driven rally in the market. Next slide, please. So where do we stand today? So you had a lot of setbacks from the last 4-5 years. You had demonetization, you had IL&FS bankruptcy, but the markets kept on ignoring all that and kept on rallying despite very weak economic data over the last 4-5 years. COVID essentially sort of brought sanity back into the market. And the correction essentially has brought levels that we've seen over the last, in the sort of broader market over the last 3 years, and perhaps in the narrow Sensex over the last levels are close to where they were 2 years ago. Now, again, the Sensex is a very, very concentrated market, concentrated index. So the rally has been driven by 4 or 5 stocks. And even in the bounce later on, it's been driven by Reliance and some of the other stocks. But broadly, a lot of these stocks are still available at where they were 3 or 4 years ago, if you ignore some of the concentrated rally that we've seen in the market. So, I mean, the correction has brought back sanity as well as valuations back to where they were perhaps 2-3 years ago, which is where we think earnings will settle at in FY21. Next slide, please. There are some green shoots that we are seeing right now. We don't know whether these are sustainable, but if you look at consumption of petroleum products after the collapse that we saw in April, they have bounced back, and now we are roughly 20% lower than where we were pre-COVID Feb levels. Peak power demand, which is the highest demand at a point in day. This is not the total power generated, but at a point in day, the highest demand in the market, highest demand for power in India. That is now almost caught up to FY19 levels. Sorry, FY20 levels a year ago exactly. So now, we don't know how sustainable this is. We'll have to wait and watch. Power generated is still about 15-20% lower than where they were a year ago. But peak power demand, which is the highest demand at a point in day, that is almost caught up to where we were pre-COVID levels. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah. So the biggest argument, apart from some semblance of green shoots of why you should invest in equities right now, is the valuations. Our expectations is that FY21 will be a write-off, but FY22 earnings could be close to where you are in FY20. So purely, even on trailing earnings, we are in line with long-term averages, which has not been the case over the last almost 4 years. Valuations have been fairly elevated. So if you are looking to build your long-term portfolio, perhaps this is a much better time to start allocating to markets. A lot of people have questions of whether it will correct even further. So you saw in Lehman times it went even further down. Nobody can forecast that. It's a difficult thing to forecast. What you can do is you can gradually start allocating to markets, use the SIP or the STP route, so that when the markets, if they were to correct, the averaging will take your cost lower, and whenever they bounce, perhaps a couple of years later, your average cost will allow you to make decent returns in line with what you've seen in history. So our valuations perhaps is the biggest argument right now for you to start allocating to equity markets. Next slide, please. In terms of what our view is on equity markets, in terms of the economy, FY21 will be a complete write-off. I think most of the economists are estimating GDP growth of minus 4 or 5%. This is a downside risk. I think if there is no stimulus which comes through later off in the year, you could see further downside pressures on the GDP estimate. But so you have to ignore the FY21 numbers whenever you're building your portfolio right now. You have to ignore the company numbers that are coming through and essentially buy with a 3-year horizon. You should expect FY22 to be a strong year because of the low base effect itself, because you've had sort of 3 months of very weak growth in FY21, which hopefully will not be there in FY22. Purely on the back of that, you could have GDP growth of 7 to 8%. And companies will start reporting strong growth in FY22. FY23 onwards, you might get back to where we are in long-term growth. Perhaps you get back to 5 and 6% or somewhere around that in terms of long-term GDP growth. So FY21 will be a write-off, and FY22 is where you start seeing the rebound in the economy. Next slide, please. In terms of market, there has been a fairly sharp bounce, again driven by flows. Given the environment that we are in, there are enough triggers for it to again sort of slip lower. We don't know whether it can or whether it will, but there is a risk that it could again slip down by another 20%. And if you're investing in the markets, that is something you have to be ready to see on your portfolio. But that will again be an opportunity to add more into the markets. Our sense is in 2 years from now, markets could be back to where they were in terms of levels that you saw pre-COVID. So you could be back to your previous peaks, because again, you will see a normalization of earning cycle from FY22 onwards. Next slide, please. So again, had the government action been a lot more stronger, perhaps you would have advised people to allocate all of your money right now, assuming the economy normalizes and equity markets sort of start reflecting that in FY22. But because it's been inadequate, our sense is that recovery will be slightly delayed. So for people who want to invest, STP perhaps, and if you have surplus money lying in the liquid fund, this is a great time to start your STPs. Liquid funds are yielding at just 3 or 4%, and that is a very low threshold for equities to beat for you to generate your long-term returns. So now is a very, very compelling time if you have long-term money parked in liquid funds or even debt funds, which have decreased a lot in yields, for you to start moving gradually to equities, to improve your long-term returns and to eventually to generate wealth. Like Pankaj explained, debt is not a wealth-generating avenue. It is for you to park a surplus money. But it doesn't generate long-term wealth. Most of the times, it will not be able to keep pace with inflation. Now, equities is a wealth-generating avenue. Given the valuations are attractive right now, and given the low yields in fixed income products, now would be a great time to start your STP into equities. Next slide, please. Just a recap of what Pankaj showed at the start. In 1990, you were spending 23,000 rupees. In 2020, that 20,000 rupees is worth 4,27,000 rupees. There has been some protection given by gold, but gold is a risk protection measure. It is not, you don't allocate to gold assuming it will generate wealth. If you had put in fixed deposits and if you have money lying in liquid funds, you will fall substantially short of the money required to meet your future expenses. But equities have proven to be a great avenue for you to keep up with inflation and to generate surplus wealth. So if you had invested in 1990, the BSE Sensex was 730 and you needed just 33 units. By 2020, even after the correction, the BSE Sensex, to meet your current expenditure, you just needed 13 units of that, and the balance 20 units would be your savings over and above the expenditure, the units that you want to meet your expenditure. Next slide, please. So in terms of how to go about planning your allocation, what you must do is you should put away your emergency money away first. Perhaps 12 months of expenses, especially what we've learned after COVID. You don't know how the world will behave. You could be out of a job. So what you need is time to rebuild yourself in your personal life, and not to be forced to liquidate your equity portfolio to meet your daily expenditure. So what you must do is put away 12 months of expense in a liquid fund or in a bank account. You must have an allocation to gold, because gold in stressful times does prove itself to be a asset class where people flock to, and under a very risk-averse environment gives you a portfolio protection. The balance 80% you can allocate to equity. What we've always advised is you should have 4 or 5 different funds, or probably 6 funds in your basket, because different funds have different styles, and each of them can do well under a certain market environment. So you can allocate out of the 80%, 20% to quantum long-term equity value fund, which is a value fund which has not that great a performance over the last 3 years, which were not great for value style. Hopefully next 3 or 5 years will be very different. But the 80% of that should go to quantum equity fund of funds, which represents a basket of 6 funds with different styles, which is not quantum funds, but funds from the industry, which they select based on their ranking parameter. We think if you just follow this model of allocation, by and large, your investment basket is complete. You don't need anything else. If you let this allocation run over the next 15, 20 years, you will be able to achieve most of your investment goals. Next slide, please. So that's sort of the end of the presentation for people who want to. Just next slide, please. A slide after that. Okay, so I thought there was a slide on the STP, but if people who want to start the STP, you can just go, yeah. So if you want to start the STP, just go on the Quantum website, just get in touch with us. Like I said, given the yields, keeping long-term money in liquid funds is not advice at all. I at 3 or 4%, it gives you a low risk way of earning some yield, but it's not a well-generating avenue. You must start looking at equities, especially given where valuations are at the moment. This is a great time to start building a long-term portfolio. And as you do your STP, if the markets were to fall, you get your rupee cost averaging. If markets were to bounce, you have some exposure to equities, and you start allocating more as markets move up. That's sort of the end of my presentation. Ghazal, you can open the floor for Q&A.
Thank you, Nilesh. Thank you, Pankaj, for the crisp and comprehensive presentation. So the main takeaway for our investors would be that with liquid funds yielding around 3 to 4% now and equity valuations having become comfortable, there is a strong case to rebalance long-term money towards equity using the STP route. And this is, of course, after you have kept aside your safe money in more liquid and safe instruments. So thank you again. I will now be taking some questions that the audience has shared with us. The first question is for you, Pankaj. Are liquid funds equally safe as bank fixed deposits or less? Okay, I think Pankaj, you're muted. Okay, till we yeah.
Sorry, I heard the question. So first thing, in banks, you have kind of guarantee on your return and even guarantee of your capital as well till 5 lakh. So in case of liquid fund or in case of any debt mutual fund, you do not have any kind of guarantee. So there is definitely a element of risk, higher risk compared to bank deposits. And again, these are subject to market risk as well. So you see their NAV moving up and down on daily basis. So just a short answer, there is higher risk compared to bank fixed deposit.
Thank you, Pankaj. The next question is for you, Nilesh. How much returns do you expect in the Quantum Long-Term Equity Value Fund after 5 years? And is there any downside protection in this fund?
There is, it's an equity fund. So I simply, if the markets were to fall, it will also fall. So there is no downside protection as such. Traditionally, what we have seen is when markets tend to be expensive, our cash levels tend to be raised. That gives some sort of protection where we don't fall as much in the market. And given that it's a value style, given that we are buying stocks which are relatively cheap compared to the rest of the market, hopefully they should fall less, which has not been the case in this fall. And I'll tell you reasons for that. But in terms of our return expectation, we don't think it should be that different from what we've seen traditionally over a long term. So since inception return, I think it should track that number. I don't think it'll be that different to where we are. But in terms of downside protection, what happens is because we run a very, very liquid portfolio, and in the initial phases of the market, when people are selling, what they're selling is liquid stocks, because illiquid stocks tend to have very low liquidity and you have a very large price damage. So in the initial phase of the fall, we tend to fall in line with the market, but later on, hopefully a performance recovers because these are quality stocks that we're holding where valuations are already cheap and they get cheaper. So people tend to come to buy them a lot more quicker. So to answer your two questions, our future expectations of returns are not that different to what we've seen historically based on a long-term since inception return. It's an equity fund, so there is no downside protection. The markets fall, it will fall in line with the market. Hopefully, given the style, we fall less than the market, but we will fall when the market falls.
All right, thanks. Nilesh, the next question is for you again. Should investors opt for growth or value funds in the next 3 years, now that growth companies are also showing reasonable valuations?
Yeah, I mean, last decade has not been the decade for value. It's been especially growth fund managers who've been ready to pay very high multiples. They've done really well. There are some signs that trend is changing, where value funds have over the last couple of months have started doing again well. Whether that is sustainable, I don't know. But like the question itself, I mean, the only major difference between a growth manager and a value manager is the price that they pay for a company. And in the correction, what happens is very high quality names which were priced exorbitantly start becoming very, very cheap, and they start coming into a value fund. So a lot of these stocks will be part of the value fund manager in this correction because they like to buy cheap. But ideally, you should have an allocation to both because they will do well in different times. My gut is, and this is a gut, I don't have a rational, I think next 5 years, value funds will do a lot better, given that risk aversion is going up in the world. But my advice is to have both in their portfolio.
All right. Thanks, Nilesh. Pankaj, the next question is for you. Why is Quantum Liquid Fund rated 2 stars by Value Research?
I'm glad you asked this question. See, first thing, most of these ratings, what you look at all the comparative sites, give very high weightage to past returns. And now, in case of liquid fund, as you all know, that it invests only into 91 days paper. So any additional return actually comes with higher risk on liquidity front or on the credit front. So as I mentioned earlier, the objective in liquid fund, usually what kind of money comes into liquid fund? You invest very short-term surplus cash into liquid fund, which is not meant to take very high risk in either way. So in case of quantum liquid fund, as I mentioned earlier, that we invest only into government securities and PSUs, which actually yield lower than many of the private companies or even lower rated companies. So that's the main reason why there is kind of lower return on quantum liquid fund compared to other liquid funds. And when you compare or give a higher weight to returns than risk, then definitely you'll get lower star. But investors need to understand that we need to strike a balance between return and risk, right? So don't give over emphasis to return, especially in case of debt funds.
All right. Thanks, Pankaj. The next question is for you, Nilesh. Can you please touch upon and explain the underperformance of the Quantum Long-Term Equity Value Fund?
Yeah, I mean, there was a detailed seminar or webinar that we did just a month ago. I wish whoever asked that question just go through that. But quickly, what I'll do is, like I said, last decade has not been the decade for value. QLTF has suffered, especially in the last 3 years. 2017 was a year where the small and mid cap boom happened. Like I said, when I showed all the data, economic data, when we were meeting companies, we were really worried of what was happening in the economy, especially after demonetization. And ground level data was telling us things were really bad. So that time, we had elevated cash, which hurt us when the markets were rallying. And plus the stocks that we had were not doing that well. Especially after IL&FS default, there's been a concentration in the rally itself, driven by just 4 or 5 stocks. So if you take the BSE Sensex returns, just I think 4 stocks contribute almost 70% of the returns, while all the other stocks were not doing that well. And because we were not owning some of these names, relative performance compared to others showed we were not doing that well. So in this correction, we've been able to buy high quality names which have come into the portfolio. So hopefully the next few years will be very different. But last few years, before this correction driven by COVID, just owning some of these names at such high multiples was extremely difficult to justify in a value fund. We are meant to be value managers. We are meant to be careful in the price that we pay for these businesses. But the price which they were quoting was essentially exorbitant compared to whatever we've seen in the history. So not owning some of these names, a very concentrated rally in these names, and then the entire small and mid cap rally where we essentially were worried of what was happening on the ground, and elevated cash levels is what hurt us over the last 3 years. Also, we had an allocation to PSU names. I think someone also asked that question because some of these names were trading at a 6-7% dividend yield. A lot of them are trading at 110 price to book, and again, they offer great value. A lot of them are monopolies in their respective sectors. Because there is a problem at the government fiscal side where they're liquidating a lot of their holdings at prices lower than current market prices, there is pressure on these names and they did not participate in the rally. But hopefully at some point that pressure abates, which is what we are seeing right now. Even the government has realized that they don't want to hold or they don't want to damage their existing holdings, and they might look at strategic divestments later on. But we are hopeful. These names are very high quality names. So net after the COVID crisis, because we've been able to add new high quality names into the portfolio, we have put in some measures where we perhaps don't liquidate names so quickly as we've done historically, and gradually ride the upside. Next 5 years will be a lot different. But they were the broad reasons why we underperformed over the last 3 years.
All right. Thanks, Nilesh. The next question is for you, Pankaj. In the backdrop of falling interest rates on fixed deposits and their tax liability, is it advisable to continue to invest in liquid funds growth option?
See, in case of liquid fund or in case of even any other fixed income instrument, everywhere rates are now coming down. So it's a investors call that totally on the investors that whether they want to hold or move. But remember, there could be times when liquid funds can underperform or give lower return compared to FDs. But when you lock your FD at lower rate for longer time, you lose on the opportunity side. You can we have seen that happening when FD rates rebound very sharply in the past, and many investors locked very long-term FDs at lower rates. So maybe you should just keep that money safe and wait for the opportunity time. That could be one rationale. But it's totally up to investors how they want to allocate. And definitely at this point where most of the liquid fund returns are very close to or lower than fixed deposit rates, there is lower incentive for investors.
Thanks, Pankaj. The next question is for you, Nilesh. Do you as a fund manager believe markets are ignoring valuations completely, or has the market discounted the COVID event and moved on 2 years ahead? And which camp are you in as far as your personal investments are concerned?
Yeah, so there are, so to answer your first question, there are two beliefs right now in the market. One is a set of people believe there is going to be a V-shaped recovery. So all the damage that was to happen has happened, and now there's going to be a strong recovery. Let's buy into the market. There is a second camp which is a lot more cautious, given that government action has been fairly weak. The damage to income has been fairly sharp. The sense is the recovery will be fairly muted, and it'll be a lot more gradual than what people expect. We are more in the second camp, where we think recovery will be fairly gradual and muted, and it will need a lot more stimulus from the government because there has been a significant impact on income for most people across the board, and a lot of the households are fairly leveraged. You will expect, or at least there is expectation that government will further intervene in the markets. But our sense is it will be a lot more gradual. But we are also in the camp which believes valuations are attractive. And we think, but not with a 6-month view, but more with a 2 or 3 year view. I think you have to be ready over the next 6 months, perhaps to see further cuts if the markets were to realize that valuations have been disconnected to what is happening at the ground. So we are bullish, but with a slightly longer time horizon, not necessarily with the near-term view. The second question on my own personal investments. So I do follow what I've listed there, right? So I have my emergency corpus, which I put in the quantum liquid fund. I don't do an STP, but I do an SIP of my own because I don't have surplus. I don't park surplus in a liquid fund. So all my SIP money, which is almost 60-70% of my net salary, goes in quantum long-term equity value fund. I can take that risk because I'm part of the fund. I understand what strategy I'm following. But for investors who are outside, perhaps a split between quantum equity fund of funds and quantum long-term equity value fund in an 80-20 ratio perhaps will be a lot better in terms of allocation. I have a small SIP running in gold for protection, but this is essentially my broad asset allocation. I don't have any investments outside of these. So all my money is essentially in quantum.
Okay. Thank you, Nilesh. The next question would be for Pankaj. What are the returns for quantum dynamic bond fund versus the quantum liquid fund, and how is the tax liability different?
I think this comparison will be kind of apple and oranges. We cannot compare these two funds in terms of return because they take a very different kind of risk in the market. In case of liquid fund, the maturity of instrument where the liquid fund can invest is capped at 91 days. But in case of dynamic bond fund, we can buy any maturity. So there are times when we take very high interest rate risk, and there are times when we actually lower the interest rate risk in the fund by investing into longer maturity paper or the shorter maturity paper. So on the return wise, if you can just compare the past return, but I don't think that would be a fair comparison between these two funds. It's better to understand the risk you are taking in different funds.
All right. Thanks, Pankaj. Nilesh, the next question is for you. What are your views on investments in fund of funds or index funds, or investing in foreign markets like US and LATAM and Europe?
Yeah, I mean, fund of funds, like I said, we are the only ones who offer it through a fund of fund where we invest essentially in other equity funds. And it's actually a very great way of allocating or getting diversification through just one fund. Traditionally, taxation was not that favorable for fund of funds, given that equity fund of funds was being taxed as non-equity, while long-term capital gains was zero in simple equity funds. But after the long-term capital gains tax got introduced, that also without indexation, now there is not much difference. In fact, over the long term, fund of funds perhaps could be more tax beneficial over long term. So I actually fairly I like the product. I think it's a very simple way of not straining yourself and just putting money and let the fund manager take care of the fund of fund. There is a double expense ratio, but given that the equity fund of funds invests in direct plans and they charge a small fee, I mean, either you can do all your research on your own and think of the value of time that is required of the time that you spend on that, or the money that you will pay to your advisor. That is essentially what is being charged for the fund for their own admin expenses, as well as the research that they're doing on your behalf. What was the second question again?
Index funds. What are your views on investing in index funds?
Yeah, last 3 years have been a great argument for investing in index funds. It is a very low cost way of allocating or getting exposure to equities. And developed markets, for sure, there is a great, most of the money actually goes to index funds. In India, unfortunately, the indexes themselves are not that well constructed. And there's so much churn that happens in the indexes every year. So every time stocks come in and go out of the index, the fund manager has to rebalance. That, of course, allows or forces him to incur costs, which automatically will return for the investor of the index fund will lower their returns compared to the index itself because of the churn. Over a period of time, I see indexing getting a lot more popular as India matures and as the stocks get more tracked like you see in the Western world. But right now, I think there is still an argument for allocation to active funds because the indexes themselves are inefficient. And I think over a period of time, active fund managers should be able to beat the index given the nature of problems that I just highlighted. For a complete newcomer who doesn't understand which funds to select, perhaps, and wants to just allocate to equities, then indexing is a very simple way. And he's able to correlate equity returns with the way the index movement happens. But over a long term, I still think right now active funds will perhaps give you better returns than an index fund. So I think investors need to be a bit more cautious while allocating to index funds.
Okay, thanks, Nilesh. The next question is for you again. What will be the effect of the India-China war on Indian equities if it happens?
Yeah, if a war happens, I think equities will tank. I think FIs will pull out money. So that's an outlier event. Whether it will happen is given that both countries are fairly focused on their economy. I doubt it will escalate dramatically. I think there are both countries are facing domestic issues and skirmishes at the border perhaps give a great diversion for both the governments. But I think sensibility will prevail. I think there's more to lose than to gain in case of a conflict. I don't think it's a very small probability event. I don't think it will happen. If it were to happen, then the markets will tank quite badly.
All right. Pankaj, the next question is for you. Could you please throw some light on the differences between a liquid fund and an arbitrage fund from the point of view of an investor who's looking to invest in these?
So in case of liquid fund, this is we pool the money and we invest into money market papers. and just passed on the interest earned on them to the investor. But in case of arbitrage fund, where they actually gain from buying and selling in the equity futures and cash market. So I think underlying dynamics are slightly different, but mostly the return, which is for the overnight kind of funding rate, that remain very close. But underlying dynamics are totally different in case of arbitrage fund compared to liquid.
All right. Pankaj, another question coming your way. What is the recommended debt fund for capital protection for an investment window of over 24 months?
Okay. So, see, at this moment, first thing we need to remember is that we have to avoid any kind of credit risk. As I mentioned in my presentation as well, that currently we see defaults or rating downgrades increasing. So avoid any kind of credit risk, number one. Even on the duration front, I mentioned that there is a huge need for spending by the government. We have already seen a lot of spending happening on the healthcare and other stuff. On the other side, government has lost a big chunk of their revenue. So just to maintain their existing spending or run their daily work, now they have to borrow a lot more from the market. The central government has already increased their borrowing, and that by almost 50% increase in their borrowing compared to the budget estimates. And even state government, at some point, they have to come in the market to borrow more. So all these new supply of debt that can actually put upward pressure on bond yields. And though there is a case that RBI will buy a lot of that supply, but till now RBI has not opened their cards. So we need to be very cautious as this juncture. It's better to avoid any kind of or very high risk in terms of even interest rate risk. So it's better to focus on funds which are investing into very short maturities and good credit quality. So mostly into government securities or this stuff. And following that view, what the view we have on the interest rate, if you look at our dynamic bond fund, we have been fairly conservative in terms of our duration positioning. So we have actually reduced our risk, interest rate risk in our dynamic bond fund, investing into very short maturity papers and also keeping some cash to just waiting for the appropriate opportunity. So in our fund also we have position like that reduce the risk.
All right. Nilesh, the next question for you. Will Nifty touch 7.5K levels again as fears of Corona second wave in China tensions are mounting?
Like I said, the entire pullback itself and the pace of the pullback has been fairly surprising. The data from the companies has not been that great. From the initial estimate of where the lockdown or how much time the lockdown will take, the lockdown is actually extended well beyond that. And it doesn't look like, given that the number of cases are expanding, it doesn't look like we will be hitting normalization anytime soon. So I don't know whether it will, but there are enough elements to take it lower if it wants to. It can correct and get back to the levels that we've seen in the month of March. Whether it will, I don't know. But like I said, there are enough triggers in the environment for it to take it lower.
All right. Pankaj, the next question for you. I want to know how CPs and CDs are affected by an equity crash. Similarly, what about sovereign bonds? Will they also be affected by an equity market crash?
So it's difficult to find any direct link, but the underlying factors or the underlying drivers could be same or related, but having different kind of impact on equities and on the bond market or the money market. So currently what we have seen, the equity market has declined because of the lockdown or the spread of virus. And to tackle the fall in economic activity, the RBI has actually reduced rates. So that led to fall in GSEC yield and the money market yields and CPCD rates all. So the underlying factor was almost the same, the lockdown and its impact on the economy. But driver was slightly different, that it was led by RBI cutting rates and infusing a lot of liquidity. But there's no direct link as such.
All right. I think we've done with pretty much all the questions. We have one last one for Nilesh. How to rebalance one's portfolio with the new normal developing in the post-COVID scenario? Where do you see markets heading post-COVID-19?
Yeah, like I said, our view is, I think in the next, if you have a 3-year view, I think markets will give you fairly decent returns. Over the next 6 months, perhaps they could surprise you on the negative. In terms of portfolio balance, I mean, people who have a fixed income and an equity portfolio, what would have happened is, if after the equity markets tanked, suddenly the equity now represents a much smaller portion of the portfolio. And given that valuations are fairly comfortable, perhaps if they want to get back to their role allocation and rebalance and move money away from fixed income to equity, now would be a much better time. I mean, when you want to allocate equities where valuations are in your favor, not when valuations are against you and they are at close to peaks, even though the markets are rising. But that will be a wrong time to allocate. If you're a buyer of equities, you buy when valuations are in your favor and hope and sort of wait it out for the valuations to rise again. So now would be a good time to move some money away from fixed income to equities if you have surplus money lying in fixed income, and get back to your role allocation before pre-COVID, because the equity allocation would be a lot lower now after the correction. Especially given the collapse in yields that you're seeing in India. Like I said, the liquid funds are just yielding 3-4%. That is as liquid as leaving money in the savings bank account. And I will be very surprised if inflation doesn't get back to its long-term trends of 5 or 6% in India. It's just suppressed right now, given that demand is very constrained. So I don't think the fixed income portfolio will generate yields for you to compensate the inflation, as well as meet your long-term wealth creation goals. And you must and you will have to look at equities to ensure your long-term wealth is created. So I think just a simple mechanism for you would be to get back to your old equity debt allocation before the collapse, and to rebalance money away from fixed income and into equities. Now would be a good time.
All right. Any closing remarks from you, Pankaj, for our investors?
So that thesis remain the same. Just look for safety at this time from any kind of risk in your debt fund, and just be safe. Yeah.
Nilesh, closing remarks, please.
My closing remarks remain the same. Equity is a well-generating avenue. Fixed income is not. I know in a risk-averse environment, you want to park money in liquid fund and other fixed income products. But you think of market as a convenience. Right now, market is giving you much lower prices for a lot of these companies and in NAVs of a lot of these mutual funds. And you have to use that convenience in your favor to allocate and to generate long-term returns. And to use the convenience of a low price to buy more units at this point in time. So equity allocation is a must for long-term wealth generation, and now is a much better time to allocate.
All right. Thank you, Nilesh. Thank you, Pankaj. Thank you to all our attendees. We hope you found the session to be helpful, to be insightful. We will be wrapping up the session now. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.